Chapter 46. Securing the rest of the gallant venture proved to be an easy task. It took several minutes until the Royal Marines were able to undo Javier Wunder's tampering with the ship's systems. After they were done, they announced the capture and subjugation of Casimir Caiston and Felicity Centaur throughout the ship and directly aimed at the remaining traitor fleet, offering death to all those who didn't surrender immediately. The scattered responses came from all across the ship, and the panicked escorts mere seconds later. None opposed. Ungently, two of them dragged Casimir and Felicity out of the bridge, while the last remaining Royal Marine sat on the captain's chair. With nothing better to do, Wyatt sat on one of the many available seats. Tiredness struck him harder than an intense high-G maneuver, and he suddenly felt his strength leave him, though not entirely. There he sat in silence, as time trudged on without meaning. It wasn't until the Royal Marine disconnected from the chair and stood up that he finally noticed his surroundings and the tactical display showcasing they were near the cattle ship, and more importantly, only a few thousand kilometers apart from the Noir Navio. "Come, Wyatt Staples, it is time for us to return to Her Majesty's side," said the Royal Marine. Wyatt stood up, and despite his fatigue, he nodded and followed the Royal Marine. They made their way back to the hangar at an almost leisurely pace. There was no urgency in the Royal Marine's step, he noticed, and whenever they came across a battle site, a quick but noticeable glance was sent his way. For his part, upon seeing the outcome of his battles, Wyatt felt nothing but a sense of satisfaction and pity mixed together. Pity, for many had lost their lives thanks to Felicity Centaur's bounty, and many more were just following orders. They were traitors. He would not weep for them, but ending their lives was still a pity. With some notable exceptions, Wyatt thought, as he glared at the body of the noble he'd killed with utmost gusto. The satisfaction he felt, however, was more personal. He'd performed to the best of his abilities and carried out his duty. Normally, that would be enough for him to smile. But he had done more than what duty called, more than what loyalty demanded, not for the principality, but for himself. Against all odds, he'd succeeded, and it brought him an immense sense of fulfillment he couldn't quite describe with words, but it was there, replacing the pyre that demanded him to carry out his mission. When they arrived at the hangar, Wyatt was surprised to find at least 500 personnel, from general staff to auxilia, mechanics, and even marines, commoners and nobles alike, all sitting on the ground, hands behind their heads, and without a single weapon in sight. As soon as they entered, every prisoner stiffened, with many avoiding to set their gaze upon them. But at least a third of them were looking at him. He could feel their eyes through their visors. "Impressive work," the Royal Marine said through a private channel. Wyatt nodded in agreement. "Can't say I blame them. If I were in their place, I too would surrender before even thinking of fighting against a Royal Marine." The Royal Marine laughed a deep, mirthful chuckle. "We can take credit for many, but not for all. When we arrived, half of their number were waiting in surrender. None of those in the medical wing are for us to claim. Your incursion was unexpected, and the results were even more so, Wyatt Staples. Outstanding performance." Wyatt felt his innards tremble in agitation, but he was too tired to protest against the praise delivered by one of the Principality's best and deadliest combatants. "I see," he replied after a long pause. Then he remembered his squadmate. "May I ask, where is Leopold Dakar?" "He was ordered to return shortly after communications were restored." "You need not worry, Lieutenant," the Royal Marine replied simply. "Are you in condition to perform your duties as a pilot?" "I am. I rested enough already," he replied instantly, despite being a blatant lie, but he was certain that he could manage a short journey back to the Nornavio. "Splendid," was the Royal Marine's reply as he stopped before the shuttle they had arrived. "The shuttle is carrying high-ranking prisoners not in critical condition and guarded by one of us. Safe travels, Wyatt Staples." "Understood," Wyatt replied and saluted, though the Royal Marine simply walked away. Their conversation ended, and Wyatt boarded the shuttle's cockpit, ran a quick diagnostics, and ignited the engine, driven more by muscle memory and force of habit than by focused intent. The travel back to the Nornavio was, as expected, short and uneventful, much to his pleasure. He was about to communicate his arrival and request entry when he saw the hangar opening up, ready to receive him. "This is Shuttle NTS-009, confirming approach vector," Wyatt said. "Confirmed. Proceed, Lieutenant," Galt Tirome replied a moment later. Wyatt frowned slightly. There was something odd in the man's tone, but he couldn't tell what it was. Not for certain. A few moments later, he shook his head. "My mind is playing tricks on me," he concluded tiredly as he proceeded to land and dock with the Nornavio. When it was done, he stood up and prepared to leave the cockpit. He opened the door and was immediately greeted by a sight that rattled his brain. "Attention!" Ordered, to his surprise, Sabraska Kaspars, the head officer of the logistical division. She stood at the front of a small file formation spearheaded by the composters. Besides them, every surviving pilot was also present, all of them saluting. There were not only pilots in the formation, but also a few mechanics and technicians, including the Icontis, a couple of Marines, and auxilia personnel. Puzzled, Wyatt stepped out and stared at the line of greeting men and women. "What's going on?" he finally asked. "We wanted to greet you properly, Lieutenant," Sabraska answered. "Commander Redford himself has recognized you as the most distinguished man during this conflict, and as such, we wish to honor your victory by showing you proper respect. Those of us who appreciate your efforts and deeds," she finished, with a subtle but clear implication. Wyatt's puzzlement turned into a sour mood at the revelation that they were doing it as a means to honor him to some capacity. He wanted to say something against it, but bit his tongue at the last second. Seeing the faces of his squad mates, he paused. Leopold was smirking knowingly. Noltar looked at him with a mix of playfulness and something akin to respect. Gregor was by far the more serious, but that same glint of respect was visible in his eyes. And finally, Raquel looked at him with a sense of admiration and regret. "They're not doing it just because of stupid honor. They're doing it because they want to?" He questioned himself, unsure of the answer. Nevertheless, his momentary annoyance was replaced by amusement. Smiling for a moment, he moved to remove his helmet and managed to control his emotions to present his usual calm, relaxed expression. Saying nothing, he returned the salute, and every man and woman in the formation straightened for a moment. When he dropped the salute, everyone else followed. "Dismissed," Sabraska ordered, nodded quietly at him with a pleased smile on her face, and then turned to return to her duties, leaving the composters behind. "Well, that was certainly something," commented Leopold. "I'm surprised that you managed to keep your mouth shut at all, Dakar," Gregor protested before turning his attention to Wyatt. "Allow me to formally congratulate you on your victory over a lone wolf, sir." "My victory? Gregor, I lost," Wyatt replied. "Maximilian Usurek was above me in every regard. He defeated me, and I would have died without your aid." "All too true," Raquel stepped forth before Gregor could protest. "He was better than all of us individually, but in the end he lost. He was too focused on his personal glory to care for anything else." Wyatt let out a soft chuckle as he rolled his left shoulder. His whole arm was still sore after blocking a sword strike. "In that case, I lost, but we won. Who scored the killing blow?" "I did, Lieutenant," Raquel replied. "Gregor gave me a clean shot at Maximilian's fighter. Rather than fight for the kill, we worked together to ensure it, even though Noltar knocked it out first." "What can I say? I'm generous like that," Noltar said with a shrug, "though it wasn't a killing blow." Wyatt was about to open his mouth when a screech made the five of them wince. Turning to his left, he found a running and very agitated Jincho running toward him. "Wormbrain!" Jincho shouted, clearing meters at a time with each stride of his strong, agile legs. When he was close enough, he leaped into the air, rolled a few times, and landed in front of the composters. "Wormbrain, happy to see you survived. Not important, not important. Have it? Do you have it? Saw your fighter die. Die! Beautiful death! Not important now. Give me! Give me!" Wyatt took a step back as Jincho's eyes, all six of them, stared into his soul with the urgency of a narcotics addict eager to take another dose. A second later, the shock passed, and he smiled widely before laughing, shaking his head. "Calm down, Jincho. I have it," he said, reassuring the crazed Ikanti enough to relax his intense gaze. Reaching behind him, he opened one of his utility pouches and from it produced a small black box. Before he could hand it over to the technician, Jincho jumped and snatched the box for himself before greedily caressing it with his beak. Wyatt's smile didn't falter, not even when the other composters were looking at the exchange with what could charitably be described as confusion. As sudden as his arrival was, Jincho chirped happily before rushing off with his treasure secured. "Wyatt, what the hell was that all about?" Leopold asked several moments later. "A promise fulfilled," Wyatt replied cryptically before noticing that Clara, flanked by a singular Royal Marine, entered the hangar. Everyone stopped once they noticed her unannounced arrival, but a single hand gesture was enough to return the activity to normal. He watched Jincho run past Clara, either too focused on his machinations or not caring enough to pay her due respect. He watched his friend giggle, her gaze following the Akanti for long seconds before setting her gaze on him. He froze when he saw a stern look in her eyes, disapproving yet elated for reasons beyond his comprehension. As she made her way to him, his squad mates rushed to form up alongside him, putting him at the front and center of their formation as their leader. At the same time, the shuttle's cargo bay opened and slowly, a group of prisoners, all of them officers, marched out to where Marines and auxilia forces were waiting to escort them to the brig. Wyatt sent a glacial glare at Felicity Cintor the moment she stepped out, handled tightly by a Royal Marine. Casimir Caiston came out on a stretcher unconscious. Paying them no more attention, he focused on the nearing princess. She stopped in front of him seconds later. "My princess!" all 5 composters said in unison, bowing their heads in respect, Leopold and Wyatt a bit deeper than their companions. "At ease, composters," Clara said softly. The composters regained their stance, but only Wyatt dared look into Clara's purple eyes. "Your prowess in battle and your instrumental part in the entire operation has been noted. You, above all else, shall be recognized for deeds performed as an elite fighter squadron. However, personal recognition shall also be granted," she said, and turned to Nultar first. "Nultar Olkara, I'd like to congratulate you for finding and delivering Maximilian Usarek with haste. Without your prompt actions, I'm certain he would have been lost forevermore." She turned to Raquel next. "Raquel Otilo, among the composters, you scored the most kills and your ability as a pilot is noted. It doesn't escape my attention that it was you who ultimately brought Maximilian's fighter down." She turned to Gregor with that same practiced, cordial smile. "But not alone. Gregor Undaj, your contributions were of particular note. Sacrificing honor and glory for the sake of protecting your comrades and ensuring overall victory," turning to Leopold, the brown-eyed man stiffened and his cheeks blushed. "Leopold Dakar, you, above all others, showcased a talent for support and the often overlooked role of being a wingman. Your talent and mindfulness have been noted." Then she turned to Wyatt. "And finally, my knight banneret, Lieutenant Wyatt Staples. I have many words to say to you, but they will be spoken in private. Composters, you are dismissed. Eat, wash, and rest. You've earned your respite. Wyatt Staples, follow me." "My princess!" 4 of the composters replied eagerly, their faces all but beaming with pride. Wyatt, however, didn't share their enthusiasm, but obeyed all the same. The walk was a silent one until they reached her quarters. As usual, her sole Royal Marine escort opened the door and stood outside, vigilant, while the princess and the pilot entered the room. The second the door closed, Clara turned to Wyatt, her eyes now burning with emotion. "I am so mad at you right now, Wyatt Staples," Clara exclaimed, stepping closer to the bewildered pilot and pressing a finger against his chest. "Cynthia!" she cried out, and a screen came to life, revealing a not at all amused blue-eyed woman on the other end. "Good to see you alive, Wyatt. Although perhaps you can clean your armor first," Cynthia pointed out. It was only after Cynthia mentioned the condition of his armor that Wyatt took notice of it. His armor presented a few marks of combat, mainly from bullets and a few faint scorch marks. But the most abundant were the brownish stains created by dried blood. Splotches and dribbles ran across his arms, shoulders, legs, helmet, and stomach. Curiously, his chest was largely intact, with his heraldic shield free from any and all stains. "Should I go?" he proposed, but was immediately shot down by the blonde princess. "Don't even dare think you can get away so easily, Wyatt Staples. I want to smack some sense into him, Cynthia. Deities know I want to, but I'm afraid that if I do, I'll be responsible for causing his psyche to be even more out of control," Clara said as she angrily poked his chest with her finger. Honestly, Wyatt, what were you thinking? I have yet to see your recorded footage. Do tell me you remembered to record everything? Wyatt nodded, not knowing how to deal with an irate princess. He turned to Cynthia for aid, but all he found was a nonchalant expression and eyes that showcased both humor and pity. Good. By Julius's name, I saw what you did through the Gallant Ventures records. I wondered what could cause 3 Royal Marines to give their collective praise, but I was not ready to witness your utter recklessness. Didn't you promise not to do anything reckless? Clara finished, turning around and covering her eyes with her right hand. I kept my promise and obeyed your command, Clara, Wyatt said a few seconds later. Excuse me? Clara replied, glaring at Wyatt. Cynthia, am I going deaf, or did I hear correctly? You're not mistaken, my princess, Cynthia replied. In that case, please, Wyatt, elucidate me. You battled your way through an enemy ship, without support and alone. Not only that, but you fought hand-to-hand against a captain, gave your supply of biofoam to a stranger, and all but slaughtered your way to the bridge. How is that not a reckless action? Clara asked. You allowed me to board the Gallant Venture, he pointed out. I did, didn't I? Clara said, then sighed deeply. You could have died at any moment. But he didn't, Cynthia said in support. Cynthia, please don't encourage him. That's the last this reckless maniac needs, she exclaimed, not knowing what else to call him. I'm not encouraging him in the least. I'm merely pointing out that he survived. That alone is an achievement for anyone who isn't a Royal Marine. Capturing the vessel itself and taking 2 prominent nobles in stride? He deserves more than mere praise, Cynthia replied. But I do have criticisms, and while I do not approve of his incursion that put his life in needless jeopardy, I applaud the skill level he's reached so far considering his limitations, concluded the blue-haired woman. I wouldn't have dared to board the Gallant Venture before, Clara Cynthia, Wyatt said, earning the attention of both women. The soul snatchers Milcades gave me. Without them, I wouldn't have passed the second group. Without this quality set of armor and shields, I don't think the idea of boarding the ship would have crossed my mind at all. Without Cynthia's training, I would have been bested easily in melee. He paused for a moment. And without you, I wouldn't have a reason to go in the first place. Clara took in a deep breath while Cynthia looked at him warmly. Why do you make it so difficult to be justifiably mad at you? The princess asked after a few seconds of silence. Why didn't you retreat at any time, hold down a safe zone and wait for the Royal Marines to arrive? The idea crossed my mind several times, Wyatt confessed, but I needed to press on. The captain, Ciro Ortega, presented the only obstacle I didn't see a way to shoot my way through. Were it not for the duel issued, I would have retreated. So you measured every encounter and decided to put your life on the line for no good reason, just to press on because you were, what, certain of your victory? Clara asked, befuddled. Wyatt shrugged. I saw a way to win and I took it. I wasn't risking my life recklessly, he replied, and Clara let out an exasperated groan. It seems our dearest Wyatt Staples is of the opinion that as long as he believes victory can be achieved, he'll do it and only consider doing something suicidal or without merit as reckless. I do recall a certain compost hauler saving a certain troublesome princess because of that same line of thinking. Clara crossed her arms, turning away from the screen. At that moment, her expression finally changed to showcase a stern smirk. While I would have preferred for it to happen under a controlled situation, Wyatt, I'm pleased with the live performance denoting your current skill level. It seems you are more than ready for me to impart more rigorous lessons upon you. Upon hearing Cynthia's words, Wyatt felt a cold hand run down his spine. Yes, please do, Cynthia, Clara declared. Cynthia gave her friend a polite nod before the connection ended. As for you, we'll discuss your actions in depth and properly later, Wyatt. Leave your helmet here. I'll extract the recordings myself. Now go, rest. You've earned it, Clara ordered, her ire dissipating at last. Understood, Clara, Wyatt replied, his fatigue hitting him harder as he tried to avoid imagining Cynthia's new regime. As he set his helmet down on the table usually reserved for pastries, a thought came to him. Clara? Yes? Clara replied. Is Maximilian still alive? He asked firmly. He is. His armor saved his life. Currently, he's in a Medicare pod, unconscious and tended to as best as we can provide. Do you disapprove? Asked the violet-eyed woman. Wyatt shook his head. No, I'm glad he still lives. I've never met a lone wolf before. I never thought I'd come to face one. It was an experience. The Principality shouldn't lose capable pilots like him. Clara smiled widely. We agree in this regard, Wyatt. Rest now. If I need you, I'll call for you. Oh, and Wyatt, despite everything that's happened, I still retain my opinion that you possess the soul of a true knight. You did not need to take offense on my behalf, but I thank you all the same. But promise me you won't do something like that again? I can trust Cynthia to carry out bloody vengeance and be my heavy-handed response, for I know her full capabilities. Or Milcady's is my second option for more delicate measures where brute force isn't enough. Even then, I don't enjoy putting my friends in danger. I have no desire to lose any of my true friends. Neither do I, Clara, Wyatt replied, smiling. The princess returned his sincere smile for several seconds before he quietly exited Clara's chambers. He made his way to his and only stopped when he was inside. It had been only hours, but it felt like ages since the last time he was in the privacy of his quarters. He didn't know when he took off his armor or for how long his shower lasted. He didn't care about such trivialities until his body rested on his bed. Wyatt closed his eyes and was asleep within seconds. It would be a dreamless sleep brought by the satisfaction of being sure he wasn't weak anymore.